To start with, I'll tell you that good leadership is good leadership, regardless of what unit you're in, what kind of uniform you wear, or suit you wear, or anything else. There are certain fundamental principles that stay the same.
Lee Van Arsdale is a retired Army colonel, West Point graduate, and Special Forces commander with over 25 years' experience in both the Green Berets and the highly secretive Delta Force.
And so this is my ego wall, somewhat common for old geezers like me to reminisce in the past.
From the invasion of Panama,
that was after about 6 days of straight operations in Just Cause,
to overseeing Delta Force teams during the Somalian peacekeeping mission in Mogadishu, Lee has led soldiers in some of the key global events of the last 2 decades. In fact, it was his experience in Mogadishu which led to a job as a technical advisor on the set of Black Hawk Down.
And it evolved from there, and next thing you knew, I found myself in Morocco for 4 months. Ridley Scott was the director, a real class act. Jerry Bruckheimer's the producer. And I had no idea what went into making a movie. I do now, but I was a total babe in the woods and just had a blast.
Lee now owns a corporate consulting business, helping international firms to protect themselves against terrorism and other security risks. Having straddled the fence between the Army and the corporate world, he has seen the similarities up close.
Well, there's a lot of parallels between that and the military. They're based on, in the military, what you call a mission statement. It's why is that corporation there? Well, it's there to make a product, it's there to provide a service, ultimately it's there to make money for itself and its stockholders. But it's got a mission. There's a reason it exists. And so they man, equip, and train that corporation to fulfill that mission. No different than the military.
But what does it take to man, equip, and train today's workforce? A workforce where goods and services are just a click away, and national borders are, in a sense, non-existent. How does a leader train and motivate knowledge workers who increasingly possess greater technical skills than his or her own, where corporate teams are encouraged to think independently? We'll take a unique approach to answering this question by investigating the covert world of Special Operations Forces, small select units of elite fighters within the U.S. Army, where highly skilled soldiers are accustomed to operating independently and where planning is driven from the bottom up rather than top down.
We do have an active recruiting effort to go out and get these people to volunteer for it because they may not know what it consists of. So we've got recruiters going to Army posts worldwide, but they do raise their hand and volunteer for it. There's no such thing as, hey, you're going to go wear a Green Beret. As I said, to get there, you go through a pretty extensive and strenuous process of being assessed, and you're finally selected, and then several months, depending on your military specialty, to go through your particular training to be either a weapons man or an engineer or a communicator or a medic. Then you have your language training. Special Forces is area oriented, so you study a particular language and the culture and the people, and then you're finally ready to join a team, 12-man A team.
How do Special Forces soldiers differ from soldiers in the rest of the Army? Well, for one thing, they're constantly on call.
They're deployed as we speak. We have them out there 60, 70 different countries, 24/7, 365. They're always out there, and there may be a shooting war going on. There may be the beginnings of one. It may be they're trying to prevent one. The entire spectrum of human endeavor is represented by Special Operations Forces.
Second, because of the unique nature of their work, Special Operations soldiers are often required to blend in with the civilian populace.
We had relaxed grooming standards. If someone had to go somewhere in civilian clothes and not necessarily portray himself as a soldier or representative of the U.S. government, then you don't want to have your typical Marine type of a haircut. The philosophy, of course, is it's a lot easier to cut off the mustache and get a haircut than it is to grow that out in very short notice. And very often we deploy with literally a couple of hours' notice, so your bags are always packed, you're always ready to go. And so it takes a special kind of a family to live that way. They had it pretty rough in a lot of ways, especially my wife, because I'd be gone for indeterminate amounts of time. They didn't know where I was, how long I'd be gone. I came home once, I think my youngest was about 10 or 12. Came home once from training at night and hadn't changed out of my uniform. And I walked in the house and he said, "Dad, you're in the Army?"
Third, because Special Forces soldiers are self-motivated, mature, and highly competent, they are given much more freedom when it comes to planning operations.
That's a pretty fundamental difference. In the conventional forces, the planning is driven from the top down. In special operations, you'll get the mission from the top, but then all the planning is done from the bottom up. So the people actually executing the mission will do all the planning for it. Primarily because you have such an experienced group who will be executing the mission, and really, no one at the top knows the business better than they do.
Lastly, while the conventional Army rarely deploys with less than a battalion, 500 troops, Special Forces soldiers normally operate in teams.
In special operations, the smallest deployable unit is the individual. It's not all unusual to have one or two men going out somewhere in or out of uniform into a situation where there may not be many rules, and the nearest boss could be a few thousand miles away. But he's also liable to be trusted with large sums of money, cash, gold bullion, you name it, when he deploys somewhere, and that's one of the items that he needs.
If this is starting to sound more like James Bond than G.I. Joe, then you're starting to get a sense for the unique role that Special Forces play in the U.S. Army. As a leader and manager, Lee dealt with many of the same challenges faced by leaders in business today. Let's take a look at the basic functions of management, which is defined as the process used to accomplish organizational goals through planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Planning is a key management function because the other functions often depend on having a good plan. As Lee pointed out previously, however, Special Forces is unique in that planning takes place from the bottom up. It takes a strong and confident leader to recognize that a subordinate's idea may be better than your own.
So you don't always have all the answers. These are very smart guys. You're talking about very experienced guys. You have to be willing to listen to that plan, and even though it differs from what you had in mind, if it's better, you have to be willing to admit that it's better and go with it.
Organizing involves allocating resources and personnel in such a way that they will be most effective. A trend that is common today to both the business world and to special operations is a movement toward self-managed teams. This structure works well for problem-solving issues, and it tends to maximize available talent. Good leaders motivate workers and create an environment for workers to motivate themselves. It is important, however, to draw a distinction between autocratic leadership, democratic leadership, and laissez-faire leadership.
You have to be decisive. There's no time in a gun battle to get a consensus and see what people are thinking and then go from there. That's a time when authoritarian leadership is called for. There are other times when you definitely want to get the consensus and be democratic.
Great leaders can also inspire incredible dedication and loyalty. This is especially true in the military, where soldiers are accustomed to self-sacrifice. Lee relates a story of two American heroes who lost their lives in Mogadishu, as depicted in the movie Black Hawk Down.
Randy and Gordy were providing sniper coverage over a battle in Somalia at the time, and one of the Black Hawk helicopters got shot down. They volunteered to go in, made multiple requests to go in, and were finally granted approval to go in and help out however they could. They had reason to believe that at least one of the pilot and crew were alive, and they went in there and basically saved the life of the pilot, Mike Durant, who he says he wouldn't be alive today without them. Unfortunately, they both lost their lives in so doing it, were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's the highest medal that you can get.
The control function of management involves measuring performance, rewarding people for work well done, and taking corrective action when necessary.
One of the most important things is what we call a hot wash. Everyone who participated gets together and goes over what went right, what went wrong, why in both cases, who did what, and it's a way to get your lessons learned down and then implement them so you don't make the same mistakes over again. And just as important, you identify what you did right so you can keep doing that right.
There are many similarities between the business world and U.S. Army Special Operations when it comes to management, leadership, and empowerment. What lessons can you take from Colonel Van Arsdale that you might apply to your own future job? What do you think made him such a great leader? Before answering this, consider the final question that we posed to Lee. Perhaps this gives the best insight into what inspired the soldiers that served under him.
What I enjoyed the most, I spent 25 years in the Army, 18 of that in special operations, and hands down the most enjoyable part of that were the people that I worked with. You're talking about very smart, very committed, focused, but fun-loving guys, physically fit, well-educated by and large, most of them self-educated, and I miss that. I have not found that anywhere since I've been out of the Army, anything quite like that. The camaraderie there is incredible. You'll see it on good teams, sports teams, corporate teams, but I've never seen it to the degree that we had in the very small, close-knit world of special operations.